I'm kind of amazed I haven't made a video about Pathlib yet. It's one of my favorite standard libs within Python, and it's so good and so easy to use for file management. It's actually kind of unreal. I use it all the time, and I'm amazed, when I came up with the kind of original sort of ideas, things to do for the Python is Awesome series, that Pathlib wasn't one of them. I suppose in part because Pathlib is one of the more well-used ones. It's not so much overlooked as, a lot of the other ones in this series. But I thought, seeing as I love this so much, and I've used it so much, I thought I'd make a video about it, because, there'll be some people that don't know, that are still using os.path, when Pathlib is kind of the better way, really, to be doing things. So I thought I'd make a video on it for you. So we're going to start by importing Pathlib. And I'm going to show you, various things. As always, I've picked out a number of things to show you. There's nothing really that complicated here, and so I'm going to be showing you kind of a lot of things that Pathlib can do. These are some of the more important things, some of the things you might be doing in the real world, like reading files and stuff like that. But we're going to start by creating our Pathlib objects, because there are a few things to talk about even with that. So we're going to do path equals pathlib.path. I hit shift at the wrong time. And then we're going to print path. And what that will do is it will just print a dot, because this creates a path for our current directory. So a dot, for those of you that don't know, represents the current directory. So when you have a pathlib.path, it creates a relative path for the current directory. If you don't want a relative path, you can instead use the .cwd class method, and that will actually now create an absolute path for you off the bat. You can interchange between the two, but these are two different ways to create it. So if you don't want to create a path and then absolute it, you can just use the CWD. Again, that creates the exact same directory. If you do a truthy check on the two, it will actually return false, because one is relative and one isn't. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, if you want to create a path for a specific directory, you can. So you can either do a relative directory by starting it with // or something, or you can do an absolute directory by doing /. Well, in this case, etc password is the example that I've gone with. And you can see it creates a path that etc /password. And this, I believe, is absolute. This is kind of one of the things you can check. I might as well show. Here you go. So that one is absolute. If I were to do, say, etc.password without the /, it wouldn't be absolute, because it treats it relative by default. So again, something to keep in mind there. Once you actually have your path, I'm going to kind of reset this to the current working directory, and then I'm going to have it as this file, pathlib tut.py, short for pathlib tutorial. If we print that, we can see that is, our pathlib tutorial.py. This path is formed of various parts. So you have, if I were to print your path.name, and if I just copy paste this, you have your stem, you have your suffix as well. So if I get rid of this first one, actually, because that's just confusing things. So you have the name, which is the actual name of the file. You have the stem, which is the actual kind of file name without the extension, and then the suffix is the extension. So the name is formed of the stem followed by the suffix, basically. You can also print path.parts, and I'm going to copy paste this again, resolve, and then u as URI. And these are just different ways to represent, a relative, that actually needs to be absolute. I did not know that. So the path.parts kind of prints out all the different parts of our file. So in this case, because it's a relative directory, all it really knows is the file name. But if we were to do, say, path.resolve, which turns it into an absolute, then you have all your different parts here. So you have your slash, and you have home, parafoxia, programs. This is all the different files that it takes to get to the actual file itself. The resolve works similarly to the absolute. I'm actually not 100% sure what the difference is, even though I've used a different one here and here. But the resolve essentially calculates the full file path to the file. So you can see we start from /home, and it does that. And then you have your as URI, which, as I've just found out, needs to be done on an absolute file path. essentially prints it out in something that like Firefox would understand. So if I were to open this in Firefox, it theoretically, if Firefox were to ever comply with that request, which I don't think is going to do, then it would be able to print it out like that. So those are different parts of the path you can access. Those are different ways the path can be represented. Now I'm going to show you, I'm just going to comment these all out again. Now I'm going to show you different ways in which paths can be manipulated and kind of, operations can be applied on them. So the first thing I want to show you is kind of different existence checks. So you can do a path.exists, and we'll do a print again. Just to test whether or not something exists at that file path. So this could be a file or a directory. If you just wanted to check for a file, then you could do is file. And if you just wanted to check for a directory, you could do is dir. So here we get true, true, false, because this file that we're manipulating right now does exist. This exists false, true, because it is a file. This false true, but this one false false because it's not a file, because it's a directory. If I were to do this, then we get true false true, because this is now a directory. This is just our relative directory. If I were to give it a file that doesn't exist, then it would be false false false, because the file doesn't exist at all, and it's not a directory either. And even if it was, that wouldn't exist. These kind of fall in line with os.path.exists, os.path.isFile without an underscore, and it is dir without an underscore. I believe they do the same thing, but you just don't need to pass the actual string path in there because you have an object saved for them. If I just comment these out again, I'm kind of just leaving all these things in here. And if I just set this back to our normal one, like that, I'm going to show you how to read text and bytes and stuff from them. So Pathlib does include functionality to be able to do that. So you can do, say, text equals path.readText, or if you wanted to, you could do read bytes. I'm not having the variable name as bytes because that is an actual type you can do. And then if I print text, I will just do one at a time, otherwise it's going to get really angry at me. I don't know why that's freaking out. Or maybe because it's the current file. So if we do, I don't really want to do this. This is kind of a plan I've got going for a future video that's not finished yet. If I do, say, rickroll.txt, just completely at random, and do something like this. Something just selected completely at random. I don't really know why I've done this. It's quite an obscure song, if you've never heard of it. You might, it's worth looking it up, I would say. But if we were to then load that, I did actually work out it didn't work because this file is open in the editor, which I should really have been able to work out myself, but never mind. You can see that we're now reading the text, and this includes the extra new line that Visual Studio Code is putting at the end. So you have, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, etc., etc. If we were to then read this as bytes, we can then print that out, and it would return a byte string instead. So you have the option to read as text or bytes. I believe if you have an image, in that case, or like a sound file, then you can use read bytes, and it will work perfectly fine. Obviously, text is only for text files. That's probably very obvious, actually, but there you go. And now we've done that. So if I just again comment this out. And move it down. I'm going to show you how to start creating things. So you can create a new file. So if we had, just have rickroll.py. You can create a new file just as is by using path.touch. So this works similar to the touch Linux command. I don't know if a similar command exists on Windows at all. That does bring into question whether this would work on Windows. I'm pretty sure it would. I can't see a reason why it wouldn't. But I've worked with things with different operating systems, and I've had to be compatible, and it can be a real nightmare making it compatible for both Linux and Windows. But we're not talking about that right now. But this will just create a file called rickroll.py, and if we wanted to create, actually we'll do it one at a time. So now we have our rickroll.py file that is created. It is empty because we haven't written anything to it. We can also, if I get rid of that, have path.makedir, and if the directory doesn't exist, then it'll make it. I believe if it does exist, it will error. Yes, but I believe you can also do exist OK equals true. So this works very similarly to os.path.makedir, I believe. I think the files are largely the same. I don't actually know if os.path has a touch. That would be interesting to find out. I'll put it on the screen. I'll look it up and put it on the screen whether it does have one. I've just never used that before, really, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, if you've used os.path before, you are probably seeing a lot of similarities between Pathlib and os.path. The main difference is that you have your object that you then run your operations on, rather than having to call an external function and then pass something into it. Interestingly as well, os.path functions can accept Pathlib objects, which is kind of funny. So now I've shown you how to create new files and directories. I'm going to show you how to write to them. Now, one difference between like writing stuff using Pathlib and writing stuff, say, using with open, is that the file does actually need to exist before you write to it in Pathlib, but there's no options to create the file if it doesn't exist. So that's probably where path.touch comes into it. There is a way that you can use Pathlib with context managers like that, but I'll get into that in a bit. So if we just get rid of that again, we come down here. Actually, if we move this up, it'd be easier than just kind of writing all this new data back out. So if we set this to rickroll.py, so the file does exist still, we can, using this path, do path.write bytes. We'll start with the write text, and we'll do text. So you can put the encoding in there and everything as well. I'm not going to bother doing that here. If you run that, then our rickroll.py doesn't have anything in it. Why does it not have anything in it? Right, I realized then that I was reading from an empty file and trying to write everything back into it. It's the joys of doing things in a tutorial, ladies and gentlemen. But now we have our actual text, and we can write our text in there. We can see that, well, okay, we've written text document, we've written text content into a Python file, but you can see that the text is now written in there. If we were to convert this to a bytes thing, and if we did, actually, we'll just leave that as text. I can't be able to change that. But if we do write bytes, so this is now a byte string, and that goes in there, and it does exactly the same thing. So it's just writing it in. So it really depends on, I suppose, the format your data happens to be in at the time, which one you use. Again, just keep in mind that if you're writing image or sound data or something like that, you need to use bytes. Probably fairly obvious, but just in case. As I said before, you can use Pathlib in file managers, not file managers, context managers. So you could do with path.open, and you set your mode in here. So we're going to set it in write mode as f, and you can do f.write text, and it will do exactly the same thing. So we now have our text in here. If I get rid of that, and then if I run it again, we can see the text being written in real time there. So it does exactly the same thing as with open would normally do, except you just again have the path stored and you're not passing it into the first argument. That really is kind of Pathlib's main thing, I suppose, that you just store paths. But it is very useful for this sort of thing, I think you'll agree. Final thing I'm going to do in this video, I know it's quite long, it's longer than I thought it was going to be, but there is a lot of useful stuff in it, is to be able to recursively search through directories. So if we do, say, p in path.glob, because this returns an iterator, not a list, and if we just search for all our py files, and then we print p, then we don't find anything. Oh yeah, because this needs to be a directory, doesn't it? I forgot to change it. So if we just search for our current directory, these are all our py files. So we see that this txt file isn't in there. I'm not going to explain glob syntax in this video. If you want to see me do a video on glob, and maybe I might do something on regex as well, and do leave a comment down below. But yeah, this is just kind of showing you how to use it with the assumption you already kind of know what glob syntax is. You can also do recursive glob using our glob, and it starts searching through the venv and that. This is functionally equivalent to this, and yeah, that does exactly the same thing. So you don't actually ever need to use our glob if you don't want to, but you can do if again you want to. So yeah, that covers everything that I wanted to talk about. It's a bit of a long one, I know, but there's a lot of really useful stuff in Pathlib. And hopefully when you make your next project that relies heavily on opening and closing files and writing things and all sorts of stuff, that you'll use Pathlib and you'll find great use and ease of use in it. If you like the video, then consider liking it to let me know, and maybe consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content like this. If you have any ideas of what you want me to do in a future video, leave them in the comment below. I read every single one, so it'd be good to hear your feedback. If you want to support this channel monetarily, you could do so in one of two ways. One, you can hit the join button below to become a member, or two, you can join Patreon using the link in the description. £1 a month on either, and you can be on the screen like these people. And I'll see you in the next video, where we finally got Python 1.0 working, and I'm going to be fixing all of the really broken things that I did in my Python 1.0, or my using Python 1.0 in 2022 video. I don't even know what year it is anymore. So I'll see you for that.